Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. It's been a while since I haven't talked deception with people and researchers and colleagues, so I'm slightly nervous, which is something I don't usually experience when talking about deception. But today I would like to start discussing actually some thoughts that we had with colleagues regarding computational measures of deceptive language. My whole thesis was dedicated to this, and during 5 years, I struggled with the global literature that was available on the topic. So I tried to narrow all the good stuff and the bad stuff in a paper to try to provide some review on computational um, linguistics when it comes to deception. So one thing to mention before we start, I'm going to use different terms here. One of them is stylometry, the other one is computational linguistics, and then I will also use natural language processing. Those are technically all three different. Stylometry comes from the authorship attribution literature, and it generally refers to style and statistics being combined to determine who wrote a paper. Computational linguistics is generally modelizing language as a set of mathematical properties, and natural language processing is generally conceived as modelizing textual and oral data. But in this case, considering that I have approximately 12 minutes, I will be using them interchangeably. However, if you would like to discuss one or the other a little bit more in depth, of course, please say so. To start very broadly, deception detection based on computational linguistics relies on two main principles. You have cue-based and model-based approaches to deception detection. Cue-based approaches rely on the analysis of the words produced in a testimony, in our case generally, or a text, which I'm going to give example of a little bit later, and they try to extract content and structure from those words. So those are really superficial analysis. We use the words that are used to try to extract some psychological insights about the person who is speaking, and ideally, try to detect deceit somewhere. Model-based approaches rely on rules that have been collected from a training data set. Some rely only on this training data set. This is something we commonly refer to as machine learning, and some combining with the existing output of an already existing text to predict the next word. That's what happens when you type on your phone, right? You type the first words, and then the computer, the system, the model is going to predict the next words that you might want to use. Sometimes those are not the right ones, and that gives some weird text that are sent around. But in our case, in our field in psychology and linguistics, we tend to use more cue-based approaches. So those are the ones I will mainly focus on today. Computational linguistics has been used a lot in the past years. The foundational study for computational linguistics and deception detection is Newman and colleagues 2003, who first relied on Luke, the software that is mostly used to work on computational linguistics and deception detection. They rely on different tools. I said Luke is one of them. It's the most used one, but we also use some other cues, such as n-grams, or also parsing, which is the grammatical analysis of a sentence, where we expect deceptive people to lie with a different structure compared to authentic people. And interestingly enough, from 2003 to today, there's been a steady increase in accuracy. The study by Newman in 2003 ranged from 60 to 70% of accuracy, up to today, some very high level models that reach 93.6% accuracy, which is at the same time fascinating and completely scary to me. But reading all this literature on computational linguistics and deception brought some questions. And those questions were summarized in three main angles that we wanted to tackle. First, could stylometry, computational linguistics, or natural language processing in its current form be used on the field by police officers, human resources, or insurance companies? The second questions was what are the advantages of relying on computational linguistic methods to detect deception? And then, of course, if you go for the advantages, you have to mention the issues that you might encounter. And we also decided to work on this. So to answer the first question, could stylometry in its current form be used on the field? We relied on 10 criteria that were expressed by Vrij and Fisher in 2016. And those 10 criteria aim to assess if a method to detect deceit could be applied on the field. If we follow those criteria, we suppose that stylometry could actually be used on the field, following the same structure and the same conclusions that Vrij and Fisher reached a few years ago. Because the results that we get from stylometry are really similar to those from the reality monitoring or statement validity analysis. But we try to nuance this, this conclusion by saying that accuracy remains generally low. The error rate for Q-based approaches is 30%, which is still huge. 1 out of 3 is wrong. And for model-based approaches, there seems to be an agreement around 20%, which is still, 1 out of 5. So still too low for us to really recommend using model-based approaches or Q-based approaches on the field. But, we keep hoping and trying to get to something that could be used on the field. But why actually would you want to use stylometry on the field? This is something we've been thinking about, and 3 main reasons actually made sense to us. First, intercoder agreement. We know that with manual methods such as reality monitoring or statement validity analysis, there is sometimes some problem with intercoder agreement, where in front of the same testimony, you get different types of ratings, and those might be a problem when it comes to assessing credibility or potential deceit. In this case, with natural language processing, the same text with the same software will get the same results. This is replicable. We get always the same analysis and the same results in the end. Second advantage of stylometry is the quickness of the analysis, of course, relying on computers. I mean, we are smart people, but we have to check every single item in the manual methods, and it takes a little bit of time. With computers and computational linguistics, there is this quickness of analysis. And then finally, you get robust results in the sense that the accuracy is close to manual methods, and it tends to be constant or even increasing across different studies. So those results would lead us to say, yes, stylometry, of course, use it on the field. However, we have also noticed some limitations that would prevent its use on the field. Those limitations are the following. First, the paradox of diversity. There are a gigantic number of cues you could use to detect deceit. However, we mainly rely on Luke. And Luke is extremely easy, and I am the first one to use it, of course. But there are other things that we should look at. And before saying that we can use stylometry on the field, we should have a look at those other cues. And those have been classified in different papers that I would gladly recommend if you're interested in this. We also have to rely, of course, on data transcription. Now, this is something that we have been struggling with. There is no guideline in our field for data transcription. We don't know what is useful when transcribing oral data to written data. We don't know if we have to keep punctuation. We don't know if we have to write down pauses. There are many aspects of language that we don't know if we should keep them in the transcript, in the verbatim. And we, as far as I know, we don't make use of technology to transcribe oral data to written data. I have not yet seen a study where this has been used. Maybe there are, and I'd gladly see them, but to the best of my knowledge, this has not been used yet. And data transcription takes a lot of time. And then there is the automation bias. And the automation bias is something that comes actually from the engineering field, where we see that people, when confronted with automated solutions to solve a problem, will either be complacent or distrust the technology. And this is something that we have not evaluated yet in our field. We don't know actually if using computational methods to detect deceit would actually be something that does more wrong than it does good. So those three questions raised actually more questions, which is always the case when you're doing research. So what is next? In my research, I tried to develop some new ideas. The first one I'm very interested on is we're relying on stylometric tools, such as natural language processing, such as Luke, but we should also consider their methods. When you work on authorship attribution, you take a whole group of authors with different texts for each author, and you see if this anonymized anonymized document, fits better with one or the other group of texts. We should consider potentially multiple, which is misspelled, sorry about that, multiple baselines, and we should also see if deception is context dependent, and if we can find some cues that are context independent. Data sets exist for specific domains in terms of deception. We have opinion spam, we have fake reviews, we're starting to get fake news data sets. Why don't we try to create a data set for interactional deception and see what it looks like and see what we can do with it to try to implement those computational linguistics methods. And the last aspect is to, as I said, evaluate if the field, if practitioners are ready to move to computational linguistics. We know that sometimes standardized manual methods such as reality monitoring or the SVA take some convincing. So computational linguistics might be maybe easier to implement or harder to implement. So this is an open question. That was somehow 12 minutes. If you would like to read more, we published a paper with all these questions that we extensively detail and criticize. And if you'd like to read it, it's open access in Frontiers in Communication. This is all I had to say for you today. Do you have any questions for me? Thank you very much for your attention.